Hey everybody, welcome to Fast Track Coaching. This is our 109th episode, and I'm thrilled to have a hero of mine and a mentor, a guy named Seth Godin, on the line. Um, he is one of a number of guests that we've had on over the last couple of years who is committed to help people move their business and their creativity in constructive ways, honoring what's going on in our times. For those of you who are new to the show, maybe this is the first time you've tuned in. This is meant to be a conversation between me, my guests, and you. And the way that works best is when you participate more than spectate. Without further ado, I just want to jump right in. Seth, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Absolutely a pleasure. Thank you for leading the way for so many years.
I really appreciate it. For those of you, I can't imagine this being so, but this is Seth Godin, a best-selling author of 12 books. Recently, he's made quite a bit of news when he decided to walk away from traditional publishing and stated out loud that he cared more about good ideas spreading, especially in book form, than making short-term bestseller sales and advances, which, as someone who always appreciates the need to pay the bills, I think that's pretty impressive. Seth, I'm wondering to get started if you could give us a little bit more context on this whole Domino Project thing, because I think a lot of folks are confused by it.
All right, well, I'll try. I've done 12 books with people I really like. I've been in the publishing industry for 25 years. My first bestseller was in '99. Simon & Schuster, HarperCollins, Penguin. But I realized I was being a hypocrite because I was always talking about how book publishing was killing itself, and yet here I was doing another book with book publishers. So I finally said, that's not authentic. I need to do the right thing here. The reason that book publishing is in trouble is that book publishers have their own customer. They think their customer is the bookstore. And so that leads to their books being scarce. It leads to things being slow. It leads to the economics of the situation being broken. And I'm lucky enough that people at Amazon have come along helping me power this thing forward and use their platform. But basically, our customer is the reader. That changes everything. I can give you 100 examples. We don't want to spend the whole time talking about it. But for example, the books we're doing cost about half of what a traditional hardcover book is going to cost. The Kindle editions for sale today at a pre-order for $1. Making it cheap makes it easy to buy a bunch. Buying a bunch makes it easy to spread. The books come in a 5-pack box and a 52-pack box. So if you like something, you can buy a bunch and give them away, right? That everything that we're focusing on is how do we make it so that a single idea, an easy to understand idea, but a challenging one, can be put into the hands of people who want to spread it. Because the fact is that the typical American buys 0 books a year, maybe 1. So most of the books are read by a small group. We can give a small group a tool that they can distribute books to a larger group, then the system's going to go forward. So we're publishing in all formats. We're going to have lots of authors. I happen to be the first one. The book comes out on Tuesday, March 1st. There'll be other books to follow. Yeah, you got a copy.
I sure did, and I love it. Being on the street team is a blast, by the way. I mentioned that a little bit on my blog, but it's fantastic. We'll talk more about this near the end of the conversation, but I'm thrilled about Poke the Box, and we'll get there in a sec. But I want to jump back to this idea of this big thought that's driving this Domino Project, and a lot of the things that you seem to be talking about in your blog is that ideas that spread win. And I'm wondering, how does that idea, or that thought, that ideas that spread win, apply to other mediums of professional creativity? Are there implications of Domino Project on other creative fields, like jokers like me who are trying to run a photo business?
All right, let's talk about the photo business. Going all the way back to Abe Lincoln, for a really long time, the photo business was a big portion of access to tools and another portion of talent. That if you had access to De Gaulle in New York, you could get processing that the average layman couldn't understand.
Right.
If you were a wedding photographer, you could get beautifully finished books delivered to the bride that she could never imagine making in her basement. If you were the photographer in 1860 that took the pictures of Lincoln and everyone else, well, you were the only guy who had the big camera, right?
Right.
Well, what happened just in the last 3 years is that doesn't matter anymore. That anyone with $200 can buy almost all the equipment they would ever need.
Right.
That anyone with access to the internet has access to all the photo finishing, printing stuff they would ever need.
Right.
So photographers have to embrace the fact that the materials and the tools are no longer scarce. So if those aren't scarce, why should I pay you money? You don't have a right to be paid money. You have to earn someone paying you money.
Right.
Well, one way that people are reinventing this is by taking a look at what the internet does and saying, if I was ubiquitous, if I distributed my work everywhere, yes, I would be able to charge per print, but no, I wouldn't be obscure anymore. But the enemy is not piracy. The enemy is not somebody taking the work and spreading it. The enemy is that no one's ever heard of you. Right. The enemy is that you weren't even considered for the job.
Right.
And that's part A of the challenge, right? Part A of the challenge is getting this other mindset that's abundance, my friend. I can't create scarcity. And then the second thing is this notion of being irreplaceable, of being the one we will miss if you're gone. So my friend Jill Greenberg is perhaps the most famous young photographer in the country. She did the picture of John McCain. She did the babies with the lollipops. She did the pictures of the monkeys and other things. Books sold tens of thousands of copies.
Right.
Jill doesn't take pictures that look like other people's pictures. That professionals look at her work and they recognize her work without seeing her name on it. When she started, people criticized her. They laughed at her style. It was too bright, it was too loud, it was too photoshopped. Well, now she's an icon. And so people say, get me Jill Greenberg. There is no substitute when someone calls you by name.
Right.
That's got to be the goal. Even if you're a wedding photographer in Cleveland, if you are the wedding photographer for some reason, because your work is so distinctive, people will ask for you by name. So it's about getting out of this thing of fitting in and shifting gears to being the one who stands out.
Fantastic. Well, let's talk about that for a second, because you mentioned a couple tools, these online social channels of, the fact that me plus my creative tools plus the internet can spread so far. How do, not just looking at the side of the consumers who can now compete where everything is abundant, but how do those tools for me, as someone who also has access to those things, change the game?
Well, there's a couple ways it might. One way is that you have permission to talk to people. So one of the things that they did at Oasis, which is a CD duplicating company, lots of people can duplicate CDs. So why should an independent musician go there? Well, what Oasis did for years is they built a mailing list of, I think it was 4,000 program directors at radio stations around the country. Mm-hmm. And if you recorded a CD with them, they would take any track you wanted, put it on a compilation CD with 15 other artists, and mail it to the program directors of all these radio stations. Mm-hmm. You could never do if you duped your own CDs.
Right.
Right? That if, as a photographer, let's say, who takes headshots of actors,
right,
you say part of the deal is your headshot will be delivered to these 500 casting directors in my weekly package of headshots, well, then, of course, you're worth paying the money for, because they're buying two things from you, not just one. Right? That gets away from this idea of taking pictures of guests at a wedding. That's a little bit tougher, right? Yeah. So maybe what you have to do if you're going to take guests of pictures at a wedding is you have to say, I bring with me something you can't get if you do it on your own. A Michael Jackson impersonator, sets for people to stand in front of, right, some sort of interaction, sure, or I have the ability to, process this in real time and everyone walks out with a memory stick at the end of the day.
Right.
Now the person's saying, wow, maybe I could do that myself, but it's just easier to pay this guy to do it, right? Or you could be like you and you could just be damn good at it. You could be so talented at working with light and at working with the people you're taking pictures of that these aren't ordinary pictures. These are actually great pictures, and that people want you to post them online for people to admire because, hey, they're sort of famous now that a sort of famous photographer took their picture. But what you can't do anymore is hang out at B&H Photo, buy a $6 Canon, and announce that you're a photographer.
Right. You said that good ideas in book form have a harder time spreading than, say, other mediums like movies, for example. Might the same be said for the ideas behind an image or a body of work or even a personal brand? I mean, there's so many photographers. and more every single day, given the enthusiast market. Is there any likening, or maybe not because it's visual? What do you think?
Well, I think we got to start by understanding that no one cares about you. I mean, like, I care about Dane in no one cares about you.
That's right.
No one's seeking you out. They're not Googling that. So the goal, if you want your idea to spread, is to make something that people actually do care about. And that's a really hard leap for people to make. You know, people come up to me all the time and say, you should be really proud of me. I finished reading Lynchpin. You know, I just don't think they go over Christopher Nolan and say, you should be really proud of me. I finished watching that whole movie. I didn't leave the theater in the middle. You know, certain things one creates that are viewed maybe as more mature or viewed as more obscure. So then the question is, how do you take your skill and apply it to something that's more likely to spread? You know, if I look at someone like Thomas Hawke, who's really opinionated, really talented, and has posted tens of thousands of pictures for free online. You know, sometimes they spread because the pictures are good. Sometimes they spread because he's ranking on Flickr. They spread because they're, you know, goofy. But the point is, you know how to take pictures that could spread if you put your mind to it. And if your picture spreads far and wide, and is on the cover of the book, even though you get a royalties,
right? Don't
you think that makes it easier to sell the next gig? Right? The enemy is not that you're going to be everywhere. The enemy is you're going to be nowhere.
Well, I want to talk more about the enemy. Given that the establishment in photography, the folks who 5 years ago, 10 years ago, even pre-digital, have often find themselves at this particular moment in time feeling very nervous. There's a flood of new photographers, it's a tight economy, there's the everyone is a photographer mindset, there's articles like the one in New York Times last spring that suggested the path of commercial viability was eroding. What does the establishment have, or is the photo industry as dead as you say the publishing industry is?
Well, the publishing industry isn't dead yet. The music industry is dead, right? The music industry is dead because all of the reasons for a musician to give up so much have gone away. And so music isn't dead. There's more music than ever before.
That's right.
More people listening more often. It's the industry part that's dead. Now, photography, when a professional photographer charges a commercial client a bunch of money, they're not just selling the picture. What they're selling is respect for the art director, deniability for the art director, reliability for the art director, right? The art director, it's not his money, so he gains nothing by getting his cousin to shoot the shot for free. What he gains when he gets Annie Leibovitz to shoot the shot is a whole bunch of things. So as long as that sort of editorial commercial work is getting purchased, professional photographers are going to be the ones to sell it. Weddings, often the client is the mother-in-law.
Right.
Because the mother-in-law wants to make sure the special day is special, and is mean you cheaped out on the photographer. So one of the things a wedding photographer sells is a story the bride and groom can tell to the mother-in-law. But often they don't do a very good job of telling that story. And if you realize that that's your job, to tell a story, because the pictures are not so different, you'll get better at telling the story, right? And so I think sometimes professionals forget that what they sell isn't always the final product, right? I did a photo shoot for Condé Nast a year ago in Times Square, and it could have been right out of the movie. There was the petulant art director changing rules in the middle of the game. There were the cops coming up wanting to know where the permit was. The photographer had 4 PAs who were carrying lights in a certain way. And the photo shoot actually was horrible. I mean, the photos I thought were unusable that they took. If they just walked us into a room with decent light and a white wall, it would have been a better photo. But in terms of what Details magazine tells itself and its readers, it was a success. So that's part of what you got to think about is how am I going to put on a show that happens to involve photography?
So you mentioned the idea of, you contrasted music with publishing, and I really appreciate the focus on